I think that many of us understand that the U.S. financial system, particularly the technology that underpins it, is woefully behind the rest of the world. We're still using payment rails that are like 75 years old. No one's going to point to it and be like, there's something that we should be emulating.
Adrian, do you feel it's been getting better though? It seems like more Democrats are openly, freely talking more about crypto.
100%. I'd say Senator Warren makes it very hard to like her. She doesn't make it easy, right?
This episode is brought to you by iTrustCapital. iTrustCapital allows you to invest in crypto as well as precious metals like gold and silver via an IRA. And this gives you huge tax advantages. So you can invest in over 90 crypto assets, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and many more. You also get access to stablecoins such as Circle's USDC and Ripple's RLUSD. And as it relates to precious metals, you can invest in gold and silver, and these are the physical assets. So you're not investing in paper gold and silver. So on this platform, you can redeem the gold and silver if you choose to, and not many platforms offer that. Now, the big advantage to investing via iTrustCapital's IRA is the huge tax advantages. Many of you know you incur capital gains taxes when you sell at a gain. Well, you can minimize the effect of some of that by doing it via an IRA, especially if you have a long-term view on crypto as well as precious metals. And you can buy and sell crypto and precious metals 24/7. It's low cost and no monthly fee. So this is a great option to get exposure to these two great asset classes. And in addition, they have a great custody solution. It's called Premium Custody Account. So it uses institutional grade crypto custody, such as Coinbase Prime, which BlackRock leverages. iTrust also uses Fidelity Digital Assets as well as Fireblocks, and it's a closed loop system. So if someone hacks into your account, they can't withdraw funds. I believe this is the second safest way to custody your assets, right behind self-custody, where you control the private keys. And within the custody account, you could buy and sell 24/7. It's low fees. So this is a great option for custody of your assets, and you can sleep at night knowing that you're getting the institutional grade custodial services. So once again, two great products here from iTrustCapital, the IRA, where you can roll over your existing 401k or IRA to iTrustCapital's version, getting the huge tax advantages, and the institutional custody. And folks, if you sign up with my link at itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto, you could get a $100 funding bonus. I have an account with iTrustCapital, so I encourage you to go check out iTrustCapital, learn about their services, and see if it's right for you. Again, you can get a $100 funding bonus by signing up via my link, which is itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto. Link will be in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm Tony Edward.
And I'm Amanda Whitcroft.
And joining us is Adrian Wall, who is the Senior Director of U.S. Policy at Tron DAO and the Managing Director of the Digital Sovereignty Alliance, which is advocating for ethical innovation in blockchain, Web3, crypto, and AI through research, education, and policies. Adrian, great to have you.
Likewise, it's great to be here. Thank you both.
Adrian, excited to chat with you because there's a lot happening with crypto legislation and you are well connected down in DC. So we're excited to get into the Parity Act and much more. But just so the audience gets to know you, tell us a bit about your background and how'd you make your way to crypto?
Sure. I'd say, like a lot of people, I actually come from a TradFi background. So I spent 20 plus years in banking and then private equity, first in New York and then going abroad. So then I joined a private equity group, DC based, called Allied Capital back in the day. And then they sent me to Hong Kong and I did a stint in China. But what was interesting is as a academic, I was an economist by trade. And so I've always maintained a real interest in currency and the economy that defines whether currencies have what the values are behind it. So when, fast forward to 2015, when digital assets first started to make their way into the public mind via blockchain, I think blockchain led the way. I, of course, took an immediate interest and made it my job to get to know more about it. So from an academic interest in blockchain to digital asset, I then became an investor, not just in Bitcoin, an early adopter of Bitcoin, but also in stablecoin and other adjacent technologies. So I went that route. And I was based in Asia at the time I was doing all this. So what brought me back to DC was watching the US take one step forward in policy and then like 2 steps back, and then 2 steps forward and then 10 steps back. And I thought to myself, I really need to, get back there and see if I can help right this ship a little bit. Without sounding cocky, I thought to myself, well, I don't have a lobbying background, but I thought, man, I can't do any worse than the people in DC are doing right now. And that's not throwing shade at some amazing organizations like the Digital Chamber, Blockchain Association, GBA. These guys have done fantastic, fantastic work. I think they were just facing a very difficult, challenging period. So it brought me there. I think what the industry needed was a voice that was willing to try to connect DeFi with TradFi. There were a lot of people facing Capitol Hill trying to, fight the good fight and spread the good word. But when it came to applications, I think the people who are on the front lines of the traditional finance world, people who in the banking industry, commercial banking, retail banking, they didn't have somebody who was willing to sit them down and say, hey, this is what, for example, stablecoins are. This is what they aren't. This is what Bitcoin does. This is what it doesn't do. This is why you should be embracing a payment rail and thinking about it as a payment rail, not the payment rail. And, don't have these nightmares that, stablecoin is coming to eat your lunch, because that's not the case. But so anyway, that was the route that I took, I think with some success. And at the same time, we had a lot of support on Capitol Hill, because I think, like it or not, the traditional finance industry is powerful. They're strong. They've got a lot of history. And they had these relationships on Capitol Hill that I think should be leveraged to our advantage and not looked at adversarially. So by talking to the traditional finance industry, I was actually able to make a lot of friends on Capitol Hill, and they were able to spread my message that way. And it was again, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'd say I think we did a great job in helping get that message to key members on Capitol Hill during the Genius Act, in particular when we were talking about it in the Senate. And we can talk a bit more about that later. So coming from traditional finance, academic interest, and then all the way back to DC to help on the policy side.
Pardon the interruption. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm the host of the Thinking Crypto podcast. I wanted to ask you if you can please support the podcast by hitting the like button, subscribing if you haven't as yet. You can leave a comment below as well. And if you're listening on a podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please be sure to follow and hit the 5-star rating. I'll let you get back to the content. Thank you so much.
I'm so curious, having done a stint in Hong Kong, China, coming back here, seeing how policy, works, how slow it can be. Is it similar, in Hong Kong overseas? Were there more obstacles as you came back home? How different was it?
Truthfully, incredibly different. And the reason for that is you have very different types of government, have very different ways of getting laws passed and regulations passed. And obviously, let's be honest, there's agendas behind everything, right? So in Asia, use China as an example, and Hong Kong now as an extension of China. Hong Kong faces a challenge in that the Chinese government has very strict currency control. That's how they maintain power. So there's absolutely no way they could allow any type of technology or resource to allow for free exchange of the RMB currency into the US dollar or other currencies, because that would immediately take away from their capital control power. And so you see the way they've approached digital assets in Hong Kong has been very tight. They did allow for some licenses to, what you could argue are VASPs, not exactly, but they basically gave some trading licenses to companies that were acting like banks. But it didn't really go anywhere. And I think they gave 2 to banks. One to HSBC and one to Standard Chartered, but not being utilized because the regulations are incredibly onerous. But then you look at a place like Singapore, without that sort of governmental burden and the currency controls in order to maintain power. And look how far they've come, and look how fast they did it, right? How progressive when it comes to their rules and regulations. So I look at Singapore as something to emulate. And I'll bring it back to the U.S. We don't have currency control issues. The U.S. dollar is the dominant currency for global trade. but we have other concerns. We have a very strong banking industry, which as I alluded to before. And we've got political agendas, for better or worse. The industry has been, unfortunately, tied to the Republican Party. And this has nothing to do with partisan politics. I'm not, you can be a Democrat or Republican. What we're trying to do is put forth the best policy for the U.S. people. But because of our political context and environment, the industry has found friends in the Republican Party. What it really needs to do now is find more friends on the Democrat Party. Again, regardless of your politics, if you want to get laws passed, the way it works in the U.S. is you need bipartisan support. So, a digital chamber, blockchain association, and an organization, Digital Sovereignty Alliance, we actually spend a lot of time on the advocacy and education on both sides of the aisle. We have to, and frankly, we need to spend a lot of time on the Dems, because the Dems in the Senate are what are going to keep us from getting to 60. To get to 60, the road leads through the Democrats.
So Adrian, do you feel it's been getting better, though? There's more Democrats who seem to be embracing this technology more so than the years before. And I think maybe because Elizabeth Warren had that top financial services seat and no one wanted to maybe say things pro-crypto, because to your point, the politics, right?
Yeah.
They may say, hey, this is just a technology. But it seems like more Democrats are openly, freely talking more about crypto.
100%. I'd say Senator Warren makes it very hard to like her. She doesn't make it easy, right? That aside, I was very encouraged at the Senate banking markup. We were there. I mean, my colleague and I watching. We were at the Senate Ag Committee markup as well, and watching it from the audience had a very different feel. The Senate Ag, you knew going into it, it became a partisan conversation leading into it, and the vote went down partisan line. In the Senate banking, I think even Senator Warren, yes, she made a big speech about lambasting crypto, but during the discussion, when certain issues came up, she made a few lighthearted jokes. She was willing to have conversations with other people on the other side of the aisle. It had a very different feel, a much more collegial, friendly feel. So I was really encouraged to see the Senate banking markup pass along slightly more bipartisan support. And that gives me a lot of hope for trying to get clarity passed on the Senate floor. I'm sure we'll talk about it on this, later on. But it's a challenge, though. We're not there yet. If you had asked me a week ago, I would have told you 80%. We're definitely getting this thing passed by July. Now I'm not so sure. And what happens if we don't? That's a whole new world. It's a whole new world if it doesn't get passed with this Congress.
Adrian, going back, can you give us an overview of the Tron DAO?
Sure. So Tron, it's the world's leading blockchain for stablecoin settlement. It serves as the critical payment rail for millions globally. I was just in Nigeria, where over 50% of stablecoin transactions occur on the Tron blockchain. If you want some specifics, so as of June, I think over 387 million user accounts on the Tron blockchain, 5 million daily active users, and over 24 billion in daily transfer volume. I mean, so it's you can see it as a major part of our ecosystem in the industry. Almost 90 billion in USDT is in circulation on Tron. And one of my favorite metrics is around 65% of all transfers, they're under $1,000. So that just kind of gives you a sense of that retail usage. We're seeing more of this stuff in the US. I mentioned global, of course. That's where you see a lot of this adoption, particularly on stablecoin. In the developing world, I think stablecoin is an existential issue. And again, we can also talk about that later. But if you go to bed one night and then you wake up the next day and you found that your savings are devalued by 15%, 20%, 30%, I mean, that's an existential crisis for you. You're looking for an alternative, right? But bring it back to the US, we're starting to see a lot more traction here, particularly for Tron. So with their Anchor Digital, which is a US regulated crypto bank, they added support for Tron blockchain, beginning with institutional custody for TRX, which is the Tron native token. So at any rate, I mean, we're seeing a lot of growth, across the ecosystem, both in the U.S. and abroad.
And then with the Digital Sovereignty Alliance, how did that come about? And is that funded or powered by Tron as well?
So no, so the important part here is Digital Sovereignty Alliance is an independent nonprofit. Within the industry, there are divided opinions when it comes to certain topics. So take the stablecoin yield debate, right? Last October, I think the vast majority of the industry would have told you we need to have yield on stablecoin. It's a critical component of our economy and what makes a stablecoin a stablecoin. You had a small minority of people saying things like, well, stablecoins were not invented to generate yield, right? It was invented for crypto trading and hedging volatility. And so I think we were one of the first. We wrote an op-ed back in October, I want to say, of last year, saying that, in my opinion, we ought to give up stablecoin yield because it's an olive branch. It's extending an olive branch to the financial institutions. Number one, as I said, it's not what stablecoins were developed for, and I think it's a small price to pay if it means getting FI support to get clarity passed. And then at the time, that was a very unpopular position to take. But now look at it. I mean, I think you talk to people today, the vast majority of the industry has kind of come over to this side. It took time and it took some convincing. But the point of it is we are able to take, I think, a bit more of a neutral position when it comes to analyzing what the implications are of policy. And so that allows us to be a little bit easier or perhaps more. We can save a lot of time when we talk to regulators, and that we're not coming with an agenda that we have to promote first. We can just get straight to the issues. We can just get straight into, okay, what is the best thing for the American public?
You mentioned Senator Warren, who, off the cameras is more, willing to have these conversations, seems more engaging, seems, I guess, more charming. Is that, I know you had mentioned, unfortunately, we're subject to the agendas of both parties, that are guilty of that. But is there a lot of political theater that we tend to, be wrapped up in more so than knowing what's actually being moved forward? And for whatever reason, because of the way the media is incentivized, because of the structure of just the way things move nowadays, are we kind of beholden to that, do you think, of more theater than we should be?
Yes. I'd say yes. Unfortunately, I'd say that the priority is political theater, especially when there are easy wins to be made by both parties. And again, I'm not coming down on one party over the other. They both are guilty of this. But let's look at the Senate Ag Committee, for example. I can tell you for a fact that the Dem side and the Republican side were working very well together in a bipartisan fashion on the markup leading up to the actual markup, in the Senate. And then about a week before, it was a decision, I believe, that were made by the parties that, we are just going to kick the can down the road and use this as an opportunity to score political points with our base. If we just pass this along party lines, if the Democrats rail against it and the Republicans support it, they show they show their bases that they are their champion, and at the same time are able to just not to have any substantive discussion, which I think is very unfortunate. But the banking committee was different. That's why, again, I was super enthusiastic coming out of that, because I thought, or at the very least, they had an opportunity to do the exact same thing. They could have just kicked it to the floor. Yeah. They decided, let's have some substantive conversations. Let's actually talk about what is dividing us. And more importantly, let's find that common ground. Let's find where we are agreeing on certain things. Take consumer protection. Nobody thinks it's a good idea to have weak consumer protection. Software developer issues. Nobody thinks it's a good idea to penalize software developers with impunity for things that they didn't do on purpose, right? So on those two topics, I think there were great substantive conversations across the aisle. And I was happy to see that, I was happy to see it. So I unfortunately, yes, I still think that the political theater is going to be the lead up to everything. but it doesn't mean we can't have these conversations. It doesn't mean it doesn't preempt having something like this passed, is I guess what I'd say.
Adrian, one of the big items that have been brought up by many Democrats is the ethics issue, and that they may not vote for the Clarity Act because of Donald Trump, his crypto businesses, and so forth. But obviously, there's a larger ethics issue with stocks and Congress being able to do
100%, man.
So how do you think this plays out?
So let me tell you what I hope the way it plays out. I think it's ridiculous. I agree with you. It's 100% ridiculous to get caught up on ethics and pin the whole thing on the crypto industry and say, you know what, the crypto industry is where we draw the line. I mean, other members of Congress and members of the executive branch can enrich themselves all they want as long as it's not crypto. But when it comes to crypto, no. Well, what kind of message does that send out to everybody else, right? It's insane to me. Having said that, it is going to be an issue. And they're going to use this as a political football to put out a lot of bad messaging that's going to, gum up the airwaves and just cause a lot of confusion. To your point, Tony, this is a much bigger issue. Look, I'm all for ethics. I am all for having clear rules of the road. I don't think politicians anywhere, whether you're the executive branch or the legislative branch or the judicial branch, none of them should be able to enrich themselves off of basically what is insider information or being able to make decisions that could compromise the American people but would benefit them, right, and self-enrich. I just think that that's such a clear, conflict. At the same time, it's a much bigger issue, right?
Yeah.
If the Democrats want to repeal what I think is, 18 U.S.C. Section 208, which is the one that allows the president or excuses the president from being caught up or having to worry about this self-enrichment. If that's the goal, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about it. No problem. But don't act like this is a crypto issue. This is much bigger than crypto makes like probably that much of the whole thing, right? You're talking real estate. You're talking, and what about overseas? What about foreign influence, right? I mean, I would be way more concerned about that than, whether Trump has a meme coin that people want to buy into. I mean, give me a break. Ridiculous.
Absolutely. Do you think, and I don't know, because we mentioned political theater earlier, that some of this is political theater just to appease the base, say, hey, we're doing our job. But, at the end of the day, many of these Democrats will come along and say, look, we got to get this done because this is the future of our economy and jobs and much more.
I think there's two types of Democrats out there, in the way they're thinking about clarity. There's one type that wants to get clarity passed in this Congress because they think that we've done a lot of bipartisan work and that this is something that's good for the American people. And by delaying it, we're actually setting up the industry and our financial ecosystem we're actually setting it up for more problems. And on top of that, add to the fact that I think that many of us understand that the U.S. financial system, particularly the technology that underpins it, is, let's face it, woefully behind the rest of the world. I mean, we're still using payment rails that are like 75 years old that nobody in the world would point to and say, okay, well, there's a beacon there's a beacon of, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, no one's going to point to it and be like, okay, well, there's something that we should be emulating, right? This is at the forefront of payment technology. So we really need to be thinking about that. So there's one type of Democrat that I think says, okay, we need to pass clarity because it's the best thing for the people. And it starts to get us down that road of improving our systems. And stuff takes time. And then now there's a second Democrat. This Democrat says, well, let's wait till we take back the House. If we take back the House, suddenly we are in the driver's seat and we can push a lot of our agenda, our reforms. Now, I'm not saying that the things that the Democrats will champion are necessarily bad, but it'll just delay the whole thing for another year. And my suspicion is what'll come out of it will be something that might be slightly more consumer friendly on a consumer protection basis, but way less industry friendly. And my concern there is that that little gain in consumer protection will not be enough to offset the sacrifice that the industry will make. And what will happen is only the big players will be able to thrive in that type of ecosystem. You'll see TradFi perhaps take over DeFi in a way that crowds out innovation. And that was the whole point of this in the first place. The whole point of this was for us to protect innovation in the US, bring innovation back to the US shores. And if we don't pass it now, my concern is we will have lost that chance forever. It'll have gone to other markets that are way friendlier, moving way faster. Australia, Singapore. I mean, hell, even Nigeria right now is looking at regulation on VASPs and stablecoin that I think is leaps and bounds ahead of ours because we're so slow when it comes to this, and we're so caught up in the politics. So yeah, that's my concern.
What are your what are your thoughts on Trump's executive orders that he's that he's trying to get passed outside of Clarity to help some things at least move a little bit forward, and again going back to I agree with you, the emotional part of everything. There's certainly a problem with, I think, Trump being this behind crypto as often as he has been, simply because you have people, politics have kind of become sports where people are loyal to a team to a fault. They're not really interested in hearing the other side or the opposing side. They're kind of loyal to their team. And so the people who are against Trump, regardless of if it was the right thing to do, they're just going to be against it because Trump is endorsing it. So I guess this question is twofold. One, what do you think of the executive orders? And two, do you think it's a mistake of how much of a champion he is for this industry?
So I'll start by answering the first question, and I'll even take a step back. I hate the political football nature of our politics, unfortunately. But, it is what it is, and so we have to work within the system. As far as some of the executive decisions and executive orders, I broadly speaking, I support I support the philosophy where these things are coming from, because all of it is coming from a point of view that we need more clarity, we need more rules of the road, we need more just common ground understanding so that everyone else knows how to interact within this ecosystem. And if you look at some of the things that's happened recently, the Ways and Means Committee's introduction of 6 digital asset tax bills and their discussion draft. I mean, it's a meaningful step toward the clarity and parity that we really, we've been long talking about, we've been long calling for. U.S. crypto tax policy. I mean, it has to be clear so that investors will come back and be able to put money into work in the system with a sense of confidence, with your average individual investor, so that they understand by trading in crypto, what are my tax implications? I don't need to worry about disclosures here or hiding it here or what. It just becomes very clear. This is the way it is. So overall, I'm really encouraged to see all of this and the executive decisions coming out of it. Now, the second part of your question is whether this is a good thing as far as having Trump be the champion of the industry. This has to be a bipartisan issue, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning of this call. So I think it does a disservice to the industry long term if we align ourselves purely with the Republican Party. I don't want to take away from, I think, what there is a benefit, and I know a lot of friends will be upset for me saying this, but Trump has done a lot for the industry. His strong man, ram it down your throat type of politics was effective in getting this, getting Genius across the finish line or at least, not getting it across the finish line, but it was effective in getting us to talk about it, to getting it out there. We still needed those 8, I think it was, in the end, it was 10 Democrats who supported and voted yes for Genius. Now, Donald Trump can't do that. President Trump can't do that. So that is where organizations like our Digital Sovereignty Alliance, Digital Chamber, and others come to play. At the same time, I think now you're starting to see the Democrat side really wanting to make amends with the industry, and I'm very happy to see this. You are seeing them make outreaches and make overtures to the industry and say, "Hey, look, Let's not dwell on the past. Looking forward, this has to be done. This has to be done across the aisle. And I think a lot of people in the industry, frankly, they're not all Republicans. Surprise. There are Democrats in the industry. There are Democrat innovators. There are CEOs of companies that are actually progressives and not conservatives. Again, I think your politics, your personal politics, should be a matter of personal choice, and that should be your own decision. And it should not influence the way we look at what is responsible and ethical policy. And so I'm encouraged to see that. I'm encouraged to see that more of the you're seeing a lot more financial support, a lot more political action campaign support, political action committee. What are those things? Those PACs, whatever they say, whatever that is. You're seeing a lot more PAC support for Democrat candidates in this cycle than I've seen in the past.
That's really great, Adrian. Great insight and well said. So walk us through what happens next to the actual bill, the Clarity Act. It made it through the markup phase, support with Democrats like Angela also Brooks and so forth. Yeah. What happens next, and how many steps or hurdles does it have to get through to get to the final passing in the Senate?
There's still a lot of outstanding issues. So ethics is something that needs to be talked about, and a compromise and understanding does need to be reached. The stablecoin yield debate is still not gone. I was quite disappointed to see Jamie Dimon come out and say what he did so publicly, especially after so much effort and goodwill went into the compromise that Senator Also Brooks was driving and trying to bring the banking industry and crypto industry together. I think he did a real disservice and to the work that they were doing. But the next step is working out these issues before closure is called, before this thing can make it to the Senate floor. And that is the work that we're all trying very hard right now to do in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. And what's interesting is a lot of the senators, look, everyone's busy. There's so much out there that is demanding their time, whether it's appropriations or road work, you name it, housing affordability. There's so many really important issues that our lawmakers need to be focusing their time and effort on. So I don't envy them their job, and I honestly think they're doing tremendous work, more or less across the board. Having said that, when they come down to looking at clarity, you need to get them on the issues that matter to them. So, for example, Senator Cortez Masto, she really cares about software developer protections. That was her issue. And so we were really happy to support her on that issue and making sure Section 604 read in a way that she was comfortable with. Other senators have different focuses. So we meet them where they are, and we try to get them to a place where they say, okay, I'm happy with this. And if this goes to floor, they never will tell you yes or no, but if this goes to floor as is, chances are I'll vote yes. And then once we've built that coalition in the Senate, 8 to 10 or more senators who are willing to vote for yes, I think you'll see the bill. You'll see the bill go to the floor. How long is that going to take? That's the question. That's the $1 million question. We are all working really hard on it. I promise you. We are working day and night. We are working weekends. The staffers on Capitol Hill are incredible. They do not sleep. I don't know how they do it, but we are working very hard to get everyone into a compromise language where people feel this is something I can really get behind.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm hoping it's July.
I was going to ask, what's the hard date in July? Is it July 31st because August recess?
So my prediction, and I'm standing by it, is July 15th, just like Genius last year. So I'd like to see closure by the end of the month. Sorry, I should walk that back a little bit, because last year, July 15th, Genius passed into law, meaning it passed the Senate, and then President Trump had signed it. That I'm not sure that happens by July 15th. If we get past the Senate by mid-July, I feel very good. I think the clarity may not get signed into law until after summer session, after we come back in the fall. But my guess is the House will be less likely to make revisions and edits that would then force us to start the process all over again.
Adrian, can you give any updates on the Parity Act and if that can pass quickly once the Clarity Act has passed? What does that look like?
So I think Parity Act can pass quickly once the Clarity Act has passed. And we were kind of talking about the U.S. crypto tax policy earlier. So by breaking the Parity Act into 7 standalone drafts on staking, mining, lending, etc., it gives the lawmakers a much clearer path to get those details right rather than rushing an omnibus. So look, I think that has a very clear path to success, but it still comes on the heels of clarity passing. And so without clarity making its way down there, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to see too much more progress being made. Because in my mind, parity is already quite clear. So just waiting on clarity to get through.
And I'm assuming, Adrian, there will be no discussions around Bitcoin reserves or Bitcoin acts until the Clarity Act and the Parity Act is done, right?
I suspect not. And frankly, I think that's probably the right call. I think one of the things that people didn't expect with Bitcoin was that so much of the liquidity that was backing Bitcoin has now been pushed into AI. And unless something changes that I don't see necessarily in the near future, I don't see Bitcoin. I don't see the Bitcoin price recovering in the way I think a lot of people wanted to see it recover. That shouldn't theoretically have any impact on whether you want to make a Bitcoin reserve, right? You should be thinking about it strategically, regardless of the fluctuations of price. But at the same time, I think it takes a lot of the wind out of the sails.
Adrian, I just want to do some wrap-up questions with you, just a little rapid fire so our audience can get to know you outside of crypto a little bit. Here goes. Early bird or night owl?
Oof. I am an early bird.
Early bird. Window seat or aisle?
Definitely aisle.
Text, email, or call?
Man, none of the above.
None of the above. How do people get in touch with you?
Oh no! I mean, you can reach me on like WhatsApp or Signal or something like that. I mean, if you're still texting, only people text me are like my parents.
What is one company outside of crypto that you admire?
All right, honestly, the first one that comes to mind, Dunkin' Donuts. And I'll tell you why. The reason is this was a company that, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I mean, they only sold donuts. And like nobody wanted to eat donuts. And you would think that that's all right. That's a wrap on your business model. You're done. But they just said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to sell breakfast sandwiches and coffee. We're going to become most famous for coffee. The name's not Dunkin' Coffee. And then they said, you know what? Let's just drop donuts. We're just called Dunkin' now. And they're incredible. People will stand by and say it's the best coffee in the world. So
it is. I watched a 60 Minutes like a little segment on coffee beans, and it was interesting to learn Starbucks uses like the lowest grade coffee bean, and Dunkin' Donuts actually uses the highest. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay,
very smart.
If you could have dinner with any person, living or dead, who is it?
Oh, well, okay. So all right, 2 answers. My one answer. There's a lesser known author. Her name is Kate Chopin. She wrote a book called The Awakening. I mean, she's passed now. It's one of my favorite books. And people who know me think that's very strange because I don't necessarily give off like massive feminist vibes. And I wouldn't necessarily classify myself as, I wouldn't necessarily classify myself in any way, but I love the book. And I think she wrote this story about feminism and a woman coming into her in a very difficult time, for women, when women's rights were not necessarily at the top of everyone's minds, and how this woman dealt with it. It's got a bit of a tragic end, but it's all about her awakening, hence the title, and how she rediscovers herself. So I would love to talk to her because I think, man, what courage! What courage to write that book at that time in our nation's history. The other person I would love to talk to living, I suspect, would be President Xi Jinping, honestly, because that guy, you never know what he's thinking. And all you ever do is hear him talk with that poker face that never changes. Contrast that to Trump, where I feel like the guy is so animated. I mean, he pretty much tells you exactly what he's thinking. So I would love to sit down and meet the president of China, and talk to him and see if I couldn't get a better sense of where his head's at, because so much of our world's security and future economic growth depends on what China does. So I would love to do that.
Interesting choices, very opposite from one another. Best advice you've ever received?
Don't do things because you feel other people are watching, and don't do things for vertical ascension within an organization. Do things because you love them. Do a good job no matter what, no matter whether anyone's watching or not. And don't worry, the rest of it will take care of itself.
Those are great words, especially in a time of social media. Adrian Wall, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all the work you're doing. We hope clarity gets passed sooner than later.
My pleasure. Me too. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't as yet. If you're listening on a podcast platform such as Spotify or Apple, please follow and leave a 5-star rating. Thank you so much.